Note here the very recurrent, let's say, computer science vocabulary that is used by Luhmann to describe just the functioning of systems. And last but not least, the primary function also of subsystems is defined. So let's use one or two examples here to exemplify how Luhmann thinks about, for instance, the political system. The system is internally organized along the lines of government and opposition. Then power, already as in the Parsonian sense, is used to communicate. This means, for instance, that if the economic system puts certain sanctions on the political system, then this does not translate into changes of the political system unless the power it's communicated in power communication. So if the economy starts to finance campaigns, political campaigns, and hence communicates in the medium of exchange that is dominant in the political system, then the political system, politicians will start to react. If the economy simply has changing prices, right, then this does not necessarily produce an interpenetration of different systems. So the dominant medium of exchange or of communication is basically also telling for how change in a system can be brought about. In the case of the economy, for instance, the dominant medium of exchange is money, and prices are the different programs. In a planned economy, prices wouldn't be the program that are implemented, right? So program, you can think about this as, in a way, different system choices or different also political programs which are put in place. And if, for instance, the ecological system produces externalities, right, then this is unimportant to the economy as a subsystem unless it affects money payments. So if the political subsystem, for instance, implements a price for carbon emissions, then this starts to pop up in the cost function of economic companies and is hence communicated in terms of money. And then also ecological problems might surface in the economy. I find this talk of subsystems, etc., quite revealing when you think about, let's say, the self-referential logic in which systems operate. And I think for this it's quite helpful also. It's obviously, an enormous architecture that you're confronted with here of different systems, but I think this view of society as a sum and more than the sum, actually, of subsystems is also enlightening when you think about this self-referentiality, which helps to explain, I think, many of the coordination problems also of modern societies. This being said, for Luhmann, there's no really such thing as one social system that encompasses everything, at least not in a very directional sense. So it is not the case, as was for Parsons, that the culture is the encompassing system, and it is not the case for Luhmann that the political system is the encompassing system. Society is sort of more than the sum of its subsystems, but it is not meant as one that is teleologically organized. According to Luhmann, this would be bad old European thinking. Okay, so this was a lot of input about functionalism and system theory. Let's briefly end on what is left and what has been criticized about it. And first of all, I refer to the famous sort of Habermas-Luhmann controversy, right? Habermas is the still contemporary plus 90-year-old philosopher and public intellectual in Germany who in the 1970s attacked Luhmann's theory a little bit on the grounds of it not having a political dimension and being, though implicitly conservative, having a status quo bias. Why? Well, as you may have seen already, Luhmann does not think that the political system has a particular place. And second, any kind of functionalist theory faces a little bit of the problem of being conservative status quo biased, because it's mainly about how how societies work and properly function, and beyond basically the explanations of how societies proper function. There's often a certain lack of describing how social change works in societies. Then Habermas criticizes also that there's a lot of use of metaphors in the system theory which might not have explanatory weight. Then, yes, Habermas is an old Europeanist who thinks that the ultimate integration of society, a little bit like in the Pearsonian sense, is moral norms. So a consensus of moral norms that are generated in free discourses and communicative processes. So Habermas in the 1980s writes a theory of communicative practices which sees rational discourse about moral problems as a little bit the solution to the threefold problem of double contingency. Habermas criticizes also that this moral dimension in societies is reduced in system theories to the cybernetic vocabulary of input-output matrices and society functioning a little bit like a heating system in your apartment. And he also criticizes a particular trait of Luhmann's theory, which, for instance, in the legal system sees legitimacy as being produced only through the proper application of procedures and not through substantive values. Recall also this distinction of formal versus substantive rationality in Weber. So according to Luhmann, then legitimacy of courts is produced already by the proper functioning of the procedures, right? Like getting a lawyer, right to get a lawyer, of every side sort of being heard in the trial, etc. Habermas holds up also the norm of substantive values being necessary for a trial being legitimate. As you may have noticed already, a lot of this architecture in these system theories is a little bit motivated by just filling out these boxes and being a little bit detached from analyzing really existing societies. Nowadays, I would say, one can describe system theories as a little bit difficult to be applied to empirical works, but as I motivated at the beginning, this functional comparison is often, I think, a very fruitful way of combining sort of previously unthought cases from very different domains and making them commensurable by simply seeing them as being functional equivalents to the solution of a certain functional problem. Yeah, a more positive view of this very particular ideal language developed by system theory could also be that it helps to shed sort of new light on the description of phenomena. And one has to admit also that system theory has a strong point when it comes to developing a grand and also universally coherent theory that really offers a vocabulary to describe any kind of institution in society, even though it produces these curious cases of finding sort of the latent pattern maintenance sort of description for each and every institution instead of finding out about the institution from an unbiased kind of perspective. So where is system theory nowadays? I would say in the German context, it's very much alive and kicking in Bielefeld, and there's probably a subgroup of a couple of dozens system theorists still around. And I think also Luhmann has been received a lot in Latin American sociology. So going chronologically, system theory and functionalism had its heyday in the 1960s and declined gradually in the 1970s also due to the criticism and influence of conflict theorists that mainly struggled with this problem of functionalist theories to describe social change, right, at a time when also the student rebellion was asking for a lot of social change in universities, societies, and it struggled also with just seeing society and social problems as mainly driven by coordination problems. So remember, it was rather my interpretation of the problem of double contingency that this also involves distributional problems around zero-sum conflicts. And this is much more than that the conflict theory perspective in sociology highlights, going back to Karl Marx and seeing society through the lens of, for instance, the powerful and the others. So one key critique of functionalism and Talcott Parsons in sociology was Seabright Mills, who in his book here, The Power Elite, offers a sociological account of the then American power elite of the 1950s in particular. He's basically a sociologist